Summer arrived early in Washington tonight, at least for some people in the nation's capital. Attorney General Bill Barr, true to his word, has just appointed a U.S. attorney to determine if surveillance of the Trump team was unlawful. Now, the announcement dropped just over an hour ago that Connecticut's U.S. Attorney John Durham will investigate the origins of the Russia investigation. Now, Durham would seem an inspired choice, as he's previously investigated issues like law enforcement corruption and destruction of CIA videotapes. Here now, former independent counsel Ken Starr and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo. All right, Ken, what is Durham going to be looking at?
Oh, he's going to get to the bottom of this. John Durham was such a brilliant choice by Bill Barr. It was so timely. We're all waiting, as you know, Laura, for the Inspector General report. But now we have perhaps the most respected prosecutor in the United States who served so brilliantly, including some assignments during the Obama administration. He's totally above politics. You can't talk about he's an angry Republican. He was confirmed by literally every member of the Senate who voted. And why? Because of his record. So we have a really honest cop on the beat now. So I'm very pleased that Bill Barr is saying, let's have the report from the Inspector General, who's a guy of integrity. Let's now have John Durham take this look as well. Great timing. And then, of course, remember, waiting in the wings is Lindsey Graham, who has said, I want to get to the bottom of this as well. We're going to find out.
Now, John, for the Democrats to have done what they did last week, moving on contempt against Bill Barr, did they think that was going to cow Bill Barr, that he was going to be dissuaded from doing what he said he was going to do in the hearing, which was take a look at the spying? Will they try to smear John Durham now? Will there be any way for them to do that, given his utter professionalism and integrity and the wide-ranging experience that he has on government corruption issues?
If I were the Democrats, I would be quite worried. And the reason why is by appointing a U.S. attorney, Attorney General Barr is essentially signaling that he thinks it's possible that criminal violations occurred in the start of the whole investigation into any kind of Trump-Russia collusion. As Judge Starr said, there's already an Inspector General investigation going on that's going to come to a conclusion. That's what you would do if you were just interested in reforming the way the department does things, the way decisions were made. But you wouldn't go with a U.S. attorney like Durham, someone of his stature, unless the Attorney General thinks actually something criminal might have happened, that someone might have violated the law, that there might have been malfeasance, that people at the FBI or the Justice Department were acting out of partisan motives, not just out of incompetence or stupidity, or they were duped by the Russians or Steele or the English or by the Clinton campaign. So if you were a Democrat, I think you would be really worried to see the appointment of a career prosecutor like this.
Now, Ken, what they were saying about Barr last week was so reprehensible on so many levels, but among the people trashing Barr was Jim Comey, who's worked with Barr, knows Barr. This is what he said last week.
He's an accomplished and very smart person, and who had nothing to lose in taking this job but his reputation. But it doesn't make me happy to say this, but I think he has lost most of his reputation with the way he's conducted himself.
Lost most of his reputation, Ken, and who might be feeling some of that early summer heat tonight but Jim Comey?
Well, it's so unfair. It's unfortunate, but it's totally unfair not just to Bill Barr, but to the Department of Justice, which he's leading. Bill Barr is deeply respected by the career people in the Justice Department, as someone who just calls it the way he sees them. And I think that's what he's been doing throughout this process. And so I regret what Jim Comey said. I profoundly disagree with it, and I hope that Bill Barr will continue to call him the way he sees him, be the honest person that he is, and don't bend to the pressures of Washington, D.C.
Hey, John, we mentioned earlier, how high could this go? How far could this investigation go? This is a presidential campaign. There was a lot riding on who won the presidency. Obviously, Obama wanted Hillary to win. We had the whole deal with her server and all of that. But we don't really know where this could go, because there really hasn't been the type of investigation. Congress can't do the type of investigation that a U.S. attorney is trained to do, correct?
Right. Actually, as someone who's worked on FISA applications, I can tell you how high it could go, because under the FISA law itself, the Attorney General has to approve the FISA application. So if the Steele dossier, which we now know was completely made up, was used as a basis for a FISA application, then you have someone who's high up in the FBI had to approve that, someone high up in the Justice Department had to approve that, ultimately the Attorney General has to approve that. And then a second thing we haven't touched on yet is it appears that the FBI tried to send in undercover informants and agents to try to infiltrate the Trump campaign. There's a whole nother set of laws that are called the Attorney General Guidelines, which are supposed to only allow that in very, very rare circumstances. So I assume the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General and maybe FBI Director Comey all had to sit down on that decision and approve it. All of their decisions should be looked at by the U.S. Attorney. And I think, again, as you were saying in the first question, some people are going to be in a lot of trouble because lying to a federal judge, lying to a federal court under oath is a perjury.
All right, guys, thank you so much.
Veteran Watergate journalist Carl Bernstein says that after 2 years of investigation, he believes that there has still been no real investigation into President Trump, and says that Attorney General Barr is part of the cover-up. Watch.
There has been no real bipartisan investigation of the most authoritarian president in our history. It's obvious to anyone who watches, anyone who looks at the facts, reads the Mueller report, the obstruction part particularly. We are in the midst of a continuing cover-up by the president, aided and abetted by the Attorney General of the United States.
Congressman Ro Khanna of California joins me now. He sits on the House Oversight Committee. Sir, very good to see you tonight. Thank you for being here. Is it fair for him to say that there has been no real investigation when we've spent an enormous amount of money and 2 years and the efforts of 19 lawyers and Robert Mueller?
Well, Bob Mueller obviously did a very thorough investigation. He concluded that there was sweeping and systematic Russian interference in our election. I think what Carl Bernstein's talking about, though, is the investigation by Congress. And Congress just got the report. Congress should have the right to hear from people like Mueller, and the American people should have that right.
You know, you say they just got the report, and it is, as you say, a very thorough report. You all want to see it without redactions. Have you made an effort to go see the unredacted version or the almost completely unredacted version?
That was only available to some of the committee chairs, and the reason they didn't go see that is they wanted it to be for all of Congress. And this could be very simple. I mean, the Attorney General could cooperate with Congress and request the court to allow us to see that. Here's why it matters. So we can ask questions to Don McGahn and others based on their earlier testimony to the FBI.
All right, let's take a look at, this is from Adam Schiff on Sunday, about the possibility of fining individuals from the White House who've been subpoenaed who are pushing back on that. Watch this.
I think if you fine someone $25,000 a day to their person, until they comply, it gets their attention.
If you can collect.
Well, if you can collect, but it affects, whether they're going to be facing ultimately hundreds of thousands of dollars of damages. I don't know how many are going to want to take that risk for Donald Trump.
What do you think about that, sir?
Well, Congress has the inherent power to levy fines if there is blatant disregard for our constitutional oversight. Now, I really hope it doesn't come to that. Yeah. I hope the courts resolve this issue. The courts can resolve this issue. I hope Justice Roberts, who clerked for Judge Friendly and cares about the credibility of the courts, will resolve the impasse and tell the courts to be expeditious.
But just looking back at, former oversight committees, I think of Eric Holder and the fact that he was also subpoenaed, denied that subpoena to appear in the Fast and Furious, denied documents to the oversight committee, and they felt very strongly at the time, as you do, that was their constitutional responsibility to have oversight, and yet they were rebuffed and got nowhere. Same thing with the IRS, who was, a lot of invading the privacy of innocent Americans who, because of their political beliefs, and they also refused to turn over those documents. Why was there not the outcry on both sides of the aisle when that was happening?
Martha, I agree with you that every executive branch has this conflict with Congress. President Bush did, President Obama, President Clinton. The difference is usually there's some accommodation. You get some witnesses, you get some documents, you come to some agreement. Here the president has really snubbed Congress and isn't giving any documents. I don't think it's in his own interest.
Turned over an enormous amount of documents, and they didn't exert executive privilege over anything.
Well, they have not to Congress. I mean, they did to Mueller, and that's exactly the point. I mean, if Don McGahn could testify to Mueller and they waived executive privilege for the Mueller report, why not allow him to testify before Congress? Why not allow the American people to hear everything and then make a judgment? The Speaker has been very clear. We're not going to do anything without public sentiment on our side. We want to have the facts out there and let the American people decide.
All right, we're going to ask some of those questions to the White House right now. Thank you very much, Representative Ro Khanna. Good to see you tonight.